September 16th, 2019. I did a little review of Stephen King's It Chapter 2. I'm sure you remember. I'm sure all of you watched that video. I'm sure you still watch it. Now I know you're lying, bitch. That video has been private for months. Sorry. In that video, I dropped a little nugget of foreshadowing.
The first one, the remake in 2017, was probably my second favorite horror movie of the decade.
Now, I'm sure all of you have been thinking every single day since September 16th, 2019, what is the #1 spot? What's the #1 horror movie that Trevor Bennett likes so much? Well, let me tell you about it. Because honestly, hardly anybody I've ever known has seen this movie, and I think it's so goddamn good. It's called Harry Potter and the Woman in Black, where Harry goes back in time to do some paperwork, and he meets a mean-ass ghost. Oh, it has nothing to do with Harry Potter? Okay. It's called The Woman in Black, starring Harry Potter, where he was already born back in time, does some paperwork, and meets a mean-ass ghost. If you think you might want to watch this movie on your own and not be spoiled, I'm gonna do a little breakdown of my overall thoughts at the end of the video. You can take that as kind of a spoiler-free review before we get into the meat of the video, so you can skip to this time here. Okay, you've been warned. We open on a casual little tea party with these dolls that look very normal and fine. All is going well until God, that's creepy. These girls simultaneously look up and I guess receive a quest to follow the call to the void. A haunting shriek is cried out by presumably their mother as we pan back to see a black veiled figure in approximately the trajectory that the girls were looking. This room will return soon. What the fuck am I doing? We get some great exposition by showing, not telling, that our main character Arthur Kipps is troubled by the fact that his wife died while giving birth to his son.
That's you.
Why do I look so sad?
That's what your face looks like.
This drives Arthur through the entire movie and explains every stupid decision he could possibly make. It's early 20th century England, so the whole environment and tone of this movie is very eerie and unsettling, you know, in a good way. Just look at this fog. What? Look at this. Excuse me. Someone at work is trying to get me to take their shift right now. Anyways, look at this fog. You could be stabbed at any moment and the person would get 2 blocks away before you could even say, yeah. Although there's no human-on-human violence in this movie. There's human on self, more human on self, just a lot of human on self, horse and human on mud, and human on train. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Arthur works for a law firm and he's going away on a little business trip because Mrs. Alice Drablow went and got herself unalived. So Daddy's gotta do some of that paperwork I was telling you about. Alone in a creepy ass mansion with a mean ass ghost where tides render the path to and from the house useless for, you know, large parts of the day. It's a great setup for being scared, honestly. A+ idea for The Woman in Black. And I know what you're thinking. Trevor, you're not wearing black at all. You're not fitting the theme of the movie. Well, here's something. One, there's a green screen behind me. I gotta pop a little bit. You can't have black. I don't have enough lights for that, okay? And 2, you're lucky I'm wearing this at all. It's hot as hell in here, but I wanted to look fly for you guys, okay? Anyways, Arthur's an emo boy right now. It sounds like he's just an emo boy all the time because his son looks like he's like 4 or 5, maybe. He's been carrying this weight for a while. And life is just kind of bad. You know, bathtubs aren't really a home necessity at this period of time. That's what life was like back then. I would have to be 4 or 5 shots deep to even go near this house. This is no big deal for Arthur. Plus,
this is your final warning.
It seems as if Arthur's measly trauma has caused his work performance to slip, so he's at risk of losing it all. And I'm talking about all that paperwork, baby.
Oh, yeah.
We see Arthur prepare for this little paperwork excursion as he boards an old-timey train and recounts his hard-knock life. It's here that we and Arthur meet Mr. Daly, kind of the secondary supporting role of the movie, and he is not superstitious, very anti-stitious. He gives Arthur a ride to his... Arthur? Is that his name? I feel like I've said the word Arthur so many times, that is not a real name anymore. He gives Arthur a ride to his Airbnb in the first car in the country, which is a nice foreshadow to an object used later in the movie to solve a problem. He also invites Arthur to have dinner with he and his wife the next night, and it's so funny because he waits until after he's out of the car being absolutely dumped on by rain, and he says way more than he needs to.
You like to have supper with my wife and me tomorrow evening? You know, we don't get to see many new faces here. Besides, the food in there, reckon even the dog wouldn't eat it.
That'd be lovely.
Once inside, Arthur is told that the rooms are full, which is bullshit because
My officer telegraphed ahead.
luckily this kind woman shows up and insists that Arthur cannot be left out in the rain and that they must have something for him, to which the big meanie says, "We don't. Unless you want to put him in the attic." You can tell that this statement has weight to it, but why? Where have we seen an attic before? Oh, right, the tea party. Haha, good times. 12 minutes in and we've come full circle from the intro, baby.
If an holiday is what you're after, sir, you'd honestly be better off further inland. It gets awfully colder, what with the sea mists.
Sea mist? Sea mist?
It's this way.
Something I absolutely love about this movie is the long sections without dialogue where it's just, again, showing instead of telling us what's happening. We're exploring this story with Arthur. We're just along for the ride as we piece together this creepy puzzle. And it's made very apparent that this little town is experiencing something really weird. I know it's old and nobody was supposed to be happy back then, but there's some serious shit going on here. So a sudden stranger from big London showing up to poke around and prod at their problems and doesn't even know what he's getting into is bound to stir something up, bound to stir their pot of beans. Seriously, nobody wants this man to do his job, and this man really wants to do his job. Again, this is your final warning. Arthur goes to grab his first round of paperwork from this dickhead who doesn't want him to go to the big scary house. He just needs to take his puny little stack and head back to the train station where he came from. This is a key turning point as he decides to go to the big scary house anyways, even if he has to fork out 6 shillings because you'll not find anyone else willing to take you there. So off they go as this little child stares at them through the window, and oh my god, look at this shit. Is he taking him to Skull Island? My god. Arthur notices a big cross sticking out of the mud near the house, another foreshadow to the issues that lie there. I also love this shot of him walking up to the house. It looks like he's being watched from something within the house. He is being watched by the camera and crew. Now we finally get to see the inside of the big creepy house, and the movie just lets you explore it with Arthur so slowly in such a spine-tingling manner. Just you and Mr. Potter. And the woman in black. Everything's dusty and crusty and grimy and blimey. What is that? Maybe it's just because I was 11 when I saw this and it stuck with me, but the way she pivots right here is bone-chilling to me. After a few seconds, this old pipe poops a little and we get essentially the first of very few jump scares in the movie. A bit more exploring and...
No.
We learned through the papers that there was a wee lad named Nathaniel Drablow. He drowned in the marsh when he was 7. His body was not recovered. This makes Arthur emo. Arthur hears a noise above and goes to investigate, and oh man, you got your hand dirty. What's he gonna use to wash that off? The loud poop water? There's these little birds chilling in the next room, and this is where we get our second jump scare. Let the record show I do not like birds. This leads Arthur to open the window to let the monstrosity out, and we get to see this menacing ghoul of a woman again, really, really far away. The dumb bird distracts him and she vanishes. But Arthur's curiosity is apparently endless with this hellish nightmare house as he bolts outside into the fog and hears a carriage mishap? This is very relevant to the story. We see a little bit of the accident, but Arthur sees nothing.
Whoa, just take it easy, man.
Arthur goes to Old Man Beardy the Grey to tell him about the accident he heard. But the man denies it because the marsh has been empty for years. But Mr. Potter snaps back with, "It's not though. I saw a woman there." This makes Beardy act weirdy. Holy shit, what's wrong with her?
She drank some lye.
Oh, okay, cool. Oh, Jesus Christ, don't do that. Arthur goes back to the tea party house where he hears this talking bird crying, and in walks the mother of the 3 girls who partied themselves to death. She's sad, and the bird makes fun of her, and she has to drink with strangers. It all makes sense. She asks him not to go back to the house with the scary lady, and says that his child may be at risk. But like I said, Mr. Daly is very antistitious. After reconvening for the promised dinner, Daly drops it on Arthur that they also have a child that's dead. Dead children are kind of becoming a theme here. He requests that Arthur not bring up the weird thing that happened earlier to his wife, or just the subject of children at all. But Mrs. Elizabeth needs no help working it into conversation. She's pretty kooky.
He wants to draw you a picture.
Archer, the medication!
No!
After she calms down, Mr. Daly tries to fill Arthur's head with doubt about the supernatural, but Arthur's too base to hear it. Mrs. Daly must be legit. She left another foreshadowing clue right on the table. At this point, the whole town is up in a tizzy about more children dying, and they're convinced it's Arthur's fault. The only one who's not convinced is Mr. Daly. The mob tries to stop them from going back to the house, but Arthur really needs to get that paperwork done. Yes, this leads to more children dying. Arthur wins the Mad Lad of the Year award for insisting that he work through the night at the house. So Daly gives him a dog to keep him company. How many dogs does this family have? Every time we come back to the house, we learn more and things get more intense, even the paperwork. So some more creepy stuff happens and we're visually shown that Arthur's trapped there. Though it's a little bit different now, because he's convinced now that the house is haunted and he's determined to get to the bottom of it. And now we're given much more story meat. So Alice and Charles Drablow were the parents of the boy who drowned, not the boy who lived. We also find out at this time that Alice had a sister named Jeanette Humphrey who was buried close by. More heebie-jeebie stuff happens and we get some extra juicy paperwork. This poor guy. Look at that shit. Oh my god. A little birthday card tells us that for some reason Nate's mummy had to send him a postcard to tell him happy birthday. Interesting. This next letter, though, is the letter to end all letters, and is read by the writer herself, Jeanette. It reveals that she is actually the mother to little Nathaniel, and Alice, her sister, had deemed her unfit to raise her own child. With this knowledge, Jeanette has every right to be pissed. Her own sister takes her son from her and loses him in some mud? And what do you know, the very next thing that Arthur finds is the adoption papers. So now it's implied at this point that Jeanette Humphrey is the woman in black, seeking revenge for her lost boy. I love the way the scene plays out because apparently Jeanette just kept sending letters and they get angrier and angrier. Like even the handwriting gets angrier. We also keep getting the shot of Arthur with a long black hallway behind him, and the tension builds beautifully as we discover more of Jeanette's story while simultaneously anxiously waiting for the next time she may pop up. And pop up she does right when Arthur reads the suspicious manner in which she died. Ring any bells? Again, the way she glides across the floor right here makes my skin crawl. And you can see her right in this mirror. Just great horror framing right there. Luckily, the dog wakes Arthur up before she can do anything too damaging, but she's made her mark. From here, Arthur goes to investigate this weird rocking, bumping noise that's growing aggressively upstairs. One thing leads to another, and we ultimately get a reenactment of Jeanette's death. This is drawn out in good horror fashion, but I can't spoil all of the fun. Just know that this is the point in the movie where things really take off. It's implied that Arthur fills Daly in on what he just saw the previous night, because the next line of dialogue is, "You don't believe me, do you?" I love this, by the way. Trust your audience. Pop quiz. Bob Saget, Bob Dylan, Bob Duncan. What do these three men have in common? That is a question I would ask if I thought you were stupid, but I know you're not stupid, and this movie knows you're not stupid. PSA to all filmmakers, don't treat your audience like dumb little baby bitches who need every detail spoon-fed to them in a little easy-squeeze, mess-free Go-Gurt tube, especially if I'm supposed to be 13 to even walk in the theater. I've got some wrinkles in my brain, I can figure it out. Spoon-feeding is unfortunately a frequent occurrence in horror movies, I feel like, but by golly, I feel respected by the woman in black. Anyway, Mr. Daly is still not having it, and neither is Arthur. But would you look at that? We were warned what might happen if Arthur returned to the candy shop. Yeah, Lucy's not making it out of this one. She's brown fucking bread. Daniel Radcliffe's performance right here is so good, by the way. He's great through the whole movie, but you can tell right here that this town is messing him up. Daly still won't budge, which is kind of understandable. He hasn't really seen anything happen with his own eyes. He probably just assumes that self-suicide is, you know, the new, the hip new trend amongst teens these days. But I love the way they tap into that fear of no one believing you about experiences you know for a fact you've had, but there's no way to prove it. The movie Smile did this recently, where a well-established psych lady is stripped of all her credibility because she's days away from being murdered by a monster that only the possessee can see. Luckily, in this movie, there's someone who gets it, and this is the part where we have it all laid out for us so we can enter the third act. Though not before receiving a very threatening drawing from, essentially, Jeanette through Elizabeth.
You've seen her, haven't you? Whenever she's been seen, on the causeway, on the marsh, in the grounds of the house, however briefly and whoever by, there has always been one sure and certain result. In some violent or dreadful circumstance, a child has died.
She makes us do it. She makes us.
They took her boy away.
So now she takes us. She saw you. She's coming.
Man, that was intense. How about some silly music to lighten the mood? See, Arthur's nanny and son are coming via train. I guess so Arthur doesn't have to travel alone again? I don't know. Either way, it doesn't look like Jeanette appreciates Arthur snooping around in her precious paperwork. And she sees an opportunity to add another prepubescent blood slide to her metaphorical box of murder. I guess this is finally enough for Mr. Daly to get on board with Arthur, so they haul ass back to the house to try to calm her down. This is where the importance of the car really shines, and this right here might be the worst thing shown in the movie. Look at how soupy that shit is. Oh my god. They retrieve the body of little Nathan in the mud and intentionally summon the woman in black using these wind-up toys that were previously established. And here we get the big showdown. Mr. Daly finally sees the shit that everyone's been talking about, and the chair starts rocking. This might be my favorite shot in the whole movie. We slowly look around the corner to see a long hallway where Jeanette stands menacingly as she does. Then the candles go out one by one as she moves closer, giving us the slightest visual hint that her face is moving closer and closer to us. It's amazing. Jeanette then lets out the most terrifying scream I had ever heard at 11 years old. It looks like she picks up the spirit of little Nathaniel and then thanks Arthur for his hard work. All is calm, so they decide to open Jeanette's grave and reunite the old smelly bodies. But in classic horror fashion, the problem never goes away. We get some last shots of the house and the paperwork as we hear a manic repetition of the words, "Never forgive." This bitch must have really been unfit to raise her kid, honestly. I'm starting to agree with Alice. I mean, this is not the Jedi way. It's been years, ma'am. Let it go. Back at 9 3/4, Harry and Albus are finally reunited. They hug and smile and stuff, and everyone goes on living happily ever after. Wait a minute, well, what's this kid doing? Oh, this ungrateful bitch. Arthur tries his best to save it. Well, maybe trying his best would have been not taking his eyes off of this kid after bringing him to the place where children end up dead at a far higher frequency than anywhere else ever. After meddling with the known cause of the problem. I would have not let that slide. Not how I would have done it. We're not really shown what happened, but we see everyone's reaction, and look at that. There's no way they're making that. Mr. Daly then sees what he'd spent the whole film denying. The woman in black and all of the children in their victimless forms. Lastly, we get an ominously beautiful scene of Arthur holding his son in the place where they had just perished. The station now empty and silent. There's an old wizard and a little baby Voldemort. Damn it, wrong movie. His boy, looking behind Arthur and the viewer, says, "Daddy, who's that lady?" This made my heart drop the first time I heard it. Is he gonna be stuck in limbo with this terrifying woman forever? Luckily, his expression changes and he calmly says, "That's your mummy." The last line of the movie is essentially, "Your mom." The deceased family rejoices at the reunion and they walk off together into the fog. The very last thing we see before credits roll is a pretty satisfying close-up of the woman in black as it pans in, and at the last second she looks at you into the camera, and then I pee my pants. This mysterious woman in black is slowly built up throughout the film, from just eerie, distant sightings of her to eventually learning why she's there, why she's causing a problem, and how the problem can be solved. And she doesn't blow her load too soon, nor does too much happen in a movie. That's a big pet peeve I have with horror movies, and that's what makes this movie special to me. You aren't shown too much too soon, and there aren't big scares at the beginning to release pressure. I think the amount of information you're given and the rate at which it's given to you is executed flawlessly. Also, they did a fantastic job with the whole mood and tone of the entire film. Color grading is very important to me, and I am so sick of the oversaturated Disney look that nearly every film has anymore. The Woman in Black is a horror movie that takes place in an old English town, and everything about the movie supports that. The visuals, dialogue, clothing, body language, spoken language, music, all of it affects that. And this movie has a very cohesive vision because of that. And again, one of the biggest aspects of it to me is the long sections of silence where you know that a phone couldn't possibly ring and take you out of it. He's just straight up stuck there with this scary ass woman. Maybe I just find old things creepy, but I think period films are a really good way to make horror movies because of that. Because technology, modern technology at least, kind of takes you out of the zone a little bit. To me at least. I'm sure period films are expensive as hell, but I really think it should be done more with horror. Especially because that's an entirely new way of thinking about civilization. You're jarred by not being surrounded by things that are comfortable to you. The entire atmosphere and environment is uncomfortable. This all being said, if you're someone who prefers a little bit more fast-paced horror, and I get it, man, the Scream movies are absolutely to die for, but you might not be as crazy about this movie as I am. It's not boring by any means. Every scene feels very necessary, offering new information or a new type of scare, ultimately helping earn a larger payoff at the end. And again, it might be because I saw this movie so young, but the monster of this movie is so simple and effective. I really do feel like one of the characters in the movie, getting the impression that you're not supposed to look at her, yet her presence is so potent. I've had a lot of really cool nightmares that stemmed from this movie. Yes, I think nightmares can be cool. And what? Who? What? Oh, haha, it's about food. I like this one actually. Bottom line is, you should watch this movie too, so you can also have cool nightmares.